The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by DraftKings, deviating from the normal schedule today to talk about legalized gambling in the United States, maybe a little bit in Canada too, because there's new bills crossing Parliament floor up north, where I am actually. So that's interesting news because you hear all the time about, this state is legalizing this, but what are the provisions that goes along? Are they going to turn it into like a lottery system that's run by the state and not let independent people in? So I figured it would be best to kind of talk this through and try to figure out, if you live in one of these states, what's a realistic timeline if you don't have legalized sports betting yet in your state, when that might actually come to fruition. Remember to smash the like button to the episode of this video and subscribe to Mayo Media Network on YouTube. Also hit the newsletter in the description and rate and review the audio podcast, and subscribe if you haven't already too. Tons of good stuff up there, always completely free on Mayo Media Network. Joining me to break this all down from LegalSportsReport.com, it's Dustin Gouker. What's going on in New York? And I probably should say right off the hop is we were recording this like 10 to 14 days from the time that it's actually airing. So things could change in the interim, but that's really the hot button one right now because it sounds like it's going to be legalized. It sounds like Como's doing this to like take some heat off of himself at the same time. But when I read more about it, like it seems really vague on who's allowed to operate in the state based on what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, so the latest is Governor Andrew Cuomo did sign the budget bill that legalizes sports betting, so online sports betting. So from that standpoint, definitely going to happen. The law is a law. It's coming. There's a variety of things that could happen between now and then. There's a lot that needs to happen between now and a launch. The earliest it could happen looks like December. I'd say the Super Bowl would be more likely, and that's not even counting possible legal challenges that have yet to surface in New York. So things are trending positively to have online sports betting in New York. But you're right, there's a lot going on in the state. We don't know exactly how people are going to bid for these. There's licenses that are up for bid in a process that we don't know exactly how it's going to work, but we know that you have to bid for a license, you have to share revenue with the state. We don't know exactly how limited it will be, but it's not a free-for-all like some of these other states that have online betting. So a lot to be done in New York, but right now it looks like you're going to have it in time for the Super Bowl, unless something happens in the next 2 weeks or sometime over the spring or summer.
Now, is that just because it takes so long to get this legislation in place, wait for the bids, go through the actual process? Because wouldn't this be something that they would want to turn the key on for week 1 NFL?
Yeah, just from my experience and how other states have rolled it out, there's been a wide swath of things that could happen. Some have rolled it, went to law to actual sports betting in a few months. Some have taken more than a year to do it. New York kind of outlines in the law how this process works, and you have to write the regulations after you do the law, and then you have because the way New York's doing it's different than other states where you have to competitively bid on how you're going to operate it, who's going to do it, and get all these licenses taken care of. So that process at least takes us through the end of the year, and then that would means in an ideal world December is at least a possibility. Again, I'd say early 2022 is more likely, but this is just how they decided to do it and tried to get they built some time in to do it right, hopefully, but we'll see if that's the outcome in the end.
Is there any one of these states, because obviously there's going to be a state by state thing as we've seen so far, how many states is it actually legalized in now, like 13?
Online betting, man, I should have had that number off the top of my head. It depends on what you count. Maryland is close. They have a bill is sitting with the governor, and if it's signed, Maryland joins that club. You have other states where there's kind of online, but it's only in certain venues. So but that's about the right number. It's more than a dozen now for kind of statewide online betting, and then you include states that have just retail sports betting where we're even more than that. But it's been the last couple of weeks have been crazy with other states joining New York as well.
So is there any one state, like let's say New York Falls and they legalize it and everything's up and running, you can play, you can download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, they get it on the bid, then you can bet online wherever you're at in the state. If New York falls, does that mean some of the other bigger states might come along with it, or are Texas? And I saw Florida's going through different legislation right now, or even California, because it feels like you need those 4 to fall. And then once it's legalized there, it's kind of open season for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we even though there's been all since 2018 in the Supreme Court decision that opened up federal sports betting outside of just Nevada, there's been just a huge rush to this. But at the same time, the amount of population that really has access to it is still fairly small. We're even though we have all these states, like you said, the four biggest states until now have not had online sports betting: California, Texas, New York, and Florida. So we're crossing New York off the list. Florida, again, right as we sit here, who knows what's going to happen in Florida? We could be looking at online sports betting there as well. But yeah, you're looking at it. There's not always a clear path to what's exactly going to happen, and how good it is for you, like as an end better or for DraftKings or for anyone, right? We don't know, like right now, we don't know for sure that DraftKings is going to be in New York because it's kind of a limited number of providers. We don't know what it's going to look like in Florida. But yes, there is this critical mass, though. We get to we start ticking off big states where there's online sports betting access. We're into the point where more than half the U.S. population will have access to it. And you can argue across state borders, there's even more. New Jersey has served the New York market obviously for years now. So, I think we're close to this critical mass where sports betting is getting close to ubiquitous. We still need a Texas and a California. California is the, obviously the crown jewel out there, the biggest state, has just obviously a huge sports fan population, but it's pretty complicated to get done in California as well.
Are there reasons for California? Because it seems like, I remember talking about this with friends in Arizona, and it seems like they're pushing it along a little bit more, and it seems to be propping up in Florida as well, is that there's certain things written into law already where the native tribes have access to this and they almost have to allow this to happen. Am I from my reading, am I reading that right? Like there needs to be some sort of deal brokered with them where they still get to siphon off a percentage of all the bets made even by other companies, and that's how they would allow this to come in?
Yeah, it's different in every state, but yes, in Arizona, the tribes have compacts with the state to offer gambling. They, as part of expanding what they do, they allowed online sports betting to happen a little bit more widely. So that's a possible model for how California gets it done. Florida, just one tribe, the Seminole tribe there, it kind of runs gambling in the state. They have, I won't get into the weeds there, but yes, they kind of control how gambling goes down in Florida. And in California, similarly, the tribes wield enormous amount of power. They have exclusivity over most forms of casino gambling. There are other issues, card rooms that exist and kind of have both poker and table games. There's racetracks. I've been covering online poker there for the better part of a decade, and they've failed to legalize that. It's the issues are kind of the same with sports betting on whether they can get it done. But Arizona does provide a model for that, for how the tribes interact with the state and have sports betting. Michigan, same way. Tribes are involved with sports betting in Michigan as well. So there's at least there's a path forward for it. But California, really sticky politically. They're trying to do a ballot measure or ballot measures to do it, so to put it up for referendum and then have enacting legislation. So we're still, right as we sit here, probably even in a best case scenario, a couple years from any type of sports betting happening in California.
So how has this been working out for the states that actually have? So let's just frame New Jersey as the example. I think they were the first one. They seem to be doing the best. I'm in Pennsylvania, I would think, in terms of generating revenue for the state. And if New York gets legalized, that has to eat into the New Jersey overall share, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen is that the state, most of the states have had some sort of open, fairly competitive market with relatively low tax rates, and that allows operators to come in and compete and make some money, reinvest in the product, reinvest into marketing, and try to acquire more customers. So New Jersey, over 20 brands live in the state. The biggest ones, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, have done well in the state, and we're talking, in any state that's legalized and had kind of this competitive market, had tens of millions to nine figures of tax revenue or revenue share that goes to the state. And you're right though, New Jersey, New York happens, and some of that gets siphoned off. Some operators say up to 25% of handle of all wagers is coming from people in New York City. Obviously, millions of people live there and work there or across the river all the time and are betting when they're in New Jersey. It's going to be, it's going to be a hit for New Jersey. And then other states beyond that, again, you look at, Indiana, Pennsylvania have fairly open competitive markets. They've done well. There are more exclusive markets. I'm in one of them here in Oregon, where there's just the lottery contracts with a single company to have online sports betting. We only have one app. it's underperformed. But there are models, the New York model is more, again, without knowing exactly how it's going to go down, more monopolistic, a little bit more a closed market. The state is asking for a revenue share of up to half of all revenue, which sounds, if that sounds like a lot, you're right, because the tax rate for sports betting, generally between like 5 and 20% in almost every state. So you're asking operators to give away that much money just to have the privilege of operating in New York potentially, and that's that's hard for sports betting is at core a low margin business, especially when you're competing with others and when you're spending on marketing and you're trying to do a lot of things at once. It's going to be tough to see that, but the state's going to make a lot of money no matter what it does. There are a lot of people who want to bet on sports in New York, and the state will make money. It's a little bit more whether how much traction they get with the betting public and moving people from offshore, and how much the operators themselves can gain a foothold in a state where they're not be able to market maybe as much as they are in other states.
So you said that Oregon has a like government run lottery. There's like one place where you can actually do sports betting. That's a lot. It's weird because in Canada, it does operate that way. You cannot do single game betting in Canada, but you can go to the corner store and play a 3-team parlay if you want through the government run. It's like, I don't know if it's federally regulated or if it's provincially regulated, but every state has its own version of quote unquote ProLine or whatever the hell it's called in Quebec, because Quebec just operates on a completely different level than the rest of the country. And it's like the biggest taker. Like they have horrible odds and they make you have to hit a parlay every single time, which is just ludicrous. It's free money for the government. So I can see why they would want to get in that, but it's also not illegal to bet on things in Canada either. So if I just open up one of what would be considered offshores in the United States, technically operate in a gray area in Canada. They have, a lot of these places have deals within Canada actually on native reserves, usually in Quebec, where they can base their operation out of because it's illegal to do that there. It's non-taxable. So it seems like this is why the government is trying to get in front of it. Like, hey, this is happening already. It's not illegal. It's just not legal. So there's never any problems with, like, I think I've been using apps to bet online for like, I guess not apps because it's smartphones, but like I've been using the internet to bet on sports for like 15, 16 years, and it's never been a problem. And for people who seek that out, it's never been a problem. When it comes to the Canadian side of this, and let's say they do legalize single game betting, do you think that they open up the doors just kind of like New Jersey did, where it's like, hey, if you have an online platform, you need to register with the government, you're going to have to pay us some sort of tax on each bet that comes in or the overall handle, but you're free to operate?
Yeah, the dynamic is a lot like the United States, except I think it's been pretty clearly a black market here. It is definitely a gray market. Big operators like Bet365 obviously take people in Canada for bets. So, but it's the same dynamic. Basically, the federal government is looking to get rid of the ban on single game wagering. That is basically what happened here in the U.S. through the Supreme Court. It wasn't legislated, but that's what's happening right now. Even as we speak, they're going to be talking about that today in Canada, about what they're doing as far as repealing that. And then that leaves it up to provinces exactly how they want to roll that out. I understand Ontario is going to be the first to do this. They're going to open it up. It's going to be a wide open free for all, where if you want to get licensed, you want to try to take bets in Ontario, you can. And it seems like it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And that's what it looks like they're doing. They're going to open up, have a competitive market, let all comers come who want to get a license. You pay tax to the government, and you see what happens and see how everything shakes out. And obviously, there's not room for 100 sports betting operators to carve out a part of a market in Canada. But that's where it is going to be open and competitive, which I think is what we've seen has worked the best here in the U.S. in terms of opening up from a ban to having a regulated and legal sports books coming that are clearly in a white market instead of a gray or black market.
Well, the openness and the competitiveness of allowing everyone to come in has to only work in the favor of the consumer, because obviously I can't bet on DraftKings Sportsbook. Although, if you have DraftKings Sportsbook available in your state, I highly encourage you to play on DraftKings Sportsbook. But the offers that all of the books are offering up to new customers to acquire these customers are absolutely insane. And 5 years from now, I don't think these are going to exist. The boosts that you can get to, bet on both sides of plus money. Why not, right? Just deposit your money on our sports book.
Yeah, I mean, I was in New Jersey soon after launch when there were a lot of these great offers. It's anywhere, like you're right, anywhere where you're in a state where you have multiple operators, you should be getting the free money, I think, right? There's there is a lot of money flowing around that is not going to flow around forever and ever. Yeah. And that's just and I'm just talking about the welcome offers. You're talking on boosts on top of that. People, everybody's just giving away free money, like on boosted lines or like, bet $1, get 100 or whatever. Like everybody's doing those things. And it is literally right now free money. So if you're not an early adopter, someday this stuff will not be there. There'll be fewer operators, will be fewer opportunities to do this. And you should be taking advantage. And if and when Ontario happens, that's going to be the same thing. It's going to be open season and just it's great for the end consumer. And I come out I cover this legislatively, regulated from a regulatory standpoint, but really in the end of the day, this is just for the consumer too, right? So you have something that you trust and something that you feel good about betting on, and also benefits your state or benefits local economies. Like that's something that's not happening right now when you're only betting at the black market or there's no regulated option. So that's what's coming to Canada, and that's what's increasingly coming to states in the US.
I've seen you really rally against offshore books and some of the content that's out there where you log on to a site, they have one of those widgets in there where they can get affiliate fees throughout, and you see some bigger platforms do this. Do you think that even the newspaper type websites or even some of the larger sports websites that have these affiliate links run through them, and they're like all third party, and the third party will take a cut of every sign up that you get, but you get a certain percentage of the affiliate that comes through if you click through that link. But there's a lot of offshores mixed with some of the legal books that are out there, which really muddies the water. Do you think that is specifically designed by the people putting these widgets on their site, like they know what they're doing, or are the people who are making these deals at some of the larger places just completely unaware of what's legal and what's not?
First off, I do like to rail against offshore sports books, but here's the thing: if is it legal? Probably not actually, but anybody who's betting on an offshore site probably not going to jail or going to get it in trouble. So from that standpoint, yes. And I don't begrudge anybody who that's your only legal option to bet on sports. Go for it, do it. That's if you feel good about it. Just know there are dangers.
Well, I want to present that because it's happened to me before. Just because you shop around for the best lines, like, oh, I'll throw some money on this site, and then you win the bet. They're like, oh yeah, we're not going to pay you. It's like, oh, now I have no recourse. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, you have that recourse. That's part of the great thing about legalization and regulation. Not everything is perfect here, but you do have, these are licensed by states. You have, something bad happens, you can go to somebody. There is a regulator you can go to. You're not going to Costa Rica or Antigua and getting anybody on the line to help you with your problem with your sports bet if you had to have a problem there. And there's good actors in the regulated market have they can't stomach having tons of bad press or bad reviews or whatever because they're not treating customers right. So yeah, there's that. I think it's pretty clear offshore sportsbooks are not operating legally under either federal or state law here in the United States. So that's where I come from it. But yes, we're still, we've been talking about this for years, right? It feels like sports betting has been around forever. It has not been around forever. It's still very early days. We're still only really almost 3 years into sports betting on a legal basis outside of Nevada. So there's still education that being done. Some people really, there's still lots of people out there who think sports betting was just legalized in the United States in 2018, and everything is fair game. And if you go to Google and you do a search, there's nothing that's going to dissuade you from that. You're going to come to an offshore sports book or an offshore information website that says, "Hey, yes, sports betting is legal in whatever state you're in. Go bet at X, Y, and Z that are not regulated or licensed by states here in the U.S." So that's the part where I come at it is, yes, there's still a lot of consumer education. We don't not everybody knows what's going on, like you and I and your listeners, of what's going on with regulated sports books. Like there's this overarching idea that sports betting is just quote unquote legal everywhere. No, that nuance is lost on the general population, and it's getting better, especially in states that have legal sports betting, but there's still a long way to go on that front.
It's just funny to see some major mainstream sports websites, like the big ones, and they'll have these they'll be quoting offshore odds. It's like, what are you guys doing? Don't you have partnerships with sports books at this point? I know you do, but you're quoting this place that's run out of Malta or something.
Yeah, and that's again, there's a lot to overcome, and even some of the media just don't know any better, and it's still education there. And I try to point it out when I see it. There are the American Gaming Association, to their credit, works with the media to try to do this. UNLV's Gaming Center just put out something talking about this, and still, yeah, I mean, what regulated books are still coming up against is that the offshore books are so entrenched, and they have been, their numbers and odds have been out there for years and years. They already have these journalists on speed dial. They have a line that they want to promote. It's out there immediately. It's still getting to that point in the US, but yeah, and you still can't bet any. Yes, DraftKings odds would be great, or anybody's odds would be great on any media report, but you can't bet on DraftKings everywhere, but you can bet on offshore sports books everywhere. That's the impetus you're overcoming. And again, I think it's time and education. And I always come out like this. I've been in journalism a long time. I don't know of another comp where somebody talks about an illegally operating business and like citing them and quoting them and offering what in their product, right? That's weird. That doesn't really happen anywhere else. And it's lack of information and education, I think, in a lot of times.
How has the legalization of poker on a statewide basis come along for the ride with sports gambling? Because it seems like that's been almost thrown aside to get the push to get sports betting in, which seems really crazy because poker was poker legal, or did it just operate in a gray area and no one cared until the bottom fell out?
Yeah, I mean, I think in retrospect, we can, I was involved with the poker industry as well and writing about it, but it's pretty clear it was existing in a gray or black area. We're 10 years after Black Friday, where online poker sites got shut down here in the US. And yeah, in retrospect, definitely wasn't. It's clearly not a white market here in the United States, and but it's been slow, and that's painful for me again as a poker player. And sports betting kind of is this new shiny toy, and it's like everybody wants it, and it's an additive product, so people don't really get bent out of shape about it. It's an easier sell in state legislatures than full-blown online casino and online poker. Online poker is still, yes, it was huge, as we both know, but it's still right now, the way it has to happen in the United States, it's just a niche product. Each state has to legalize it, just like sports betting. And it's different for poker because you need this. Poker requires just a mass amount of people playing at one time, and you really can't get that. We have, Michigan just launched earlier this year. We have at least New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Nevada also have legalized it. Those last three states, not including Pennsylvania, compact together where you can share player pools and people can play against each other in all those states. What you need is more of that to happen. You need, Pennsylvania, Michigan to decide to join that compact, which is possible at least. And then you're starting to talk critical mass where poker is something again, where there's a lot of people playing and there's a lot of excitement. When it has to happen on a ring-fenced basis where people can't play against other people. And I get this question more than anything, even though I cover sports betting largely, like you're not going to be able to play against the rest of the world in poker. It's going to be United States only, most likely. But we're getting there, and hopefully other states start adopting us. And poker and casino combined as a vertical, casino more so, but that revenue is more meaningful to states than even sports betting, and that's going to become more and more clear as Michigan and Pennsylvania and New Jersey continue to grow. Like online casino and poker combined create way more revenue than sports betting. So if you're looking to plug holes in the budget, I think that's where you start looking if you're a state. And Michigan is the most recent one, just earlier this year, has really shown the possibility. They're already getting $100 million in operator revenue that turns into tax revenue, and there's a lot to be said for there. So hopefully poker comes along for the ride as online casino gets more of a look in more states.
Yeah, I would think that online slots would be like the most profitable thing for a state of all time.
It absolutely is. And, the worry has been it cannibalizes land-based casinos, which I reject. New Jersey has been doing this for years, and like they have seen just exponential growth in casino. And, obviously it's weird during the pandemic and limits on how many people can be in casinos, but it's been additive to what New Jersey has done and has helped plug a hole. And, it's going to help grow the casino industry just in general. And we see bigger brands, heck, obviously DraftKings has casino, BetMGM, and Caesars, which are traditionally land-based casino, are really pushing hard into to online casino. This is the revenue opportunity, and it's a growth opportunity for states, operators, everyone, jobs, etc. Yeah, and I'm with you. I I see like, oh yes, poker used to be huge. If we get back to that critical mass of states with poker could be huge again for sure. And then again, you're not going to just legalize online poker probably anywhere. It's going to be casino come along for the ride. And New York, California have looked at poker in the past, just hasn't gotten to the finish line. But as you look for these revenue opportunities and ways to fill state budgets in times when things are down, and this is the thing that makes sense. And casinos are increasingly more comfortable with that idea and having legalized online casino.
Do you think that poker is kind of fallen by the wayside because it doesn't have these huge monolith leagues that are attached to it? Where if you look at the NFL, be like, oh, if we pass sports gambling, people can bet on the NFL, something that most Americans watch, and just sports in general. Where poker, like we said, is, even though it was huge at one point, and even if you took all of those people who were interested in poker and loved watching like Poker After Dark on TV and logged on to Poker Stars or whatever it might have been, it's nowhere near the size of the market of sports.
Yeah, I mean, sports betting, it's hard to describe, but sports betting is just an easier sell to a state lawmaker and policymaker. It's easier to wrap their head. This didn't used to be legal. We've done it in Nevada forever. People are doing it anyway. It's very much, it's easier to sell that. And you're right, the lobbying behind it, everybody kind of lobbies together at this point. Casinos and leagues and operators and sports books, they're all getting together and saying, this is kind of what we want. And that makes it easier too, when there's a consistent message. People have not, the lobbying for poker has lagged behind. That used to be aggressive. It's less aggressive, but again, I think as these companies the largest companies are trying to expand their business. A lot of them are publicly traded, including DraftKings now. They're looking at this and like, what is our growth segment? They're going to start pushing for this more as a way to, grow the casino industry and grow the online gambling industry in parallel.
So for things like the DraftKings stock, because it is a publicly traded thing, Penn's publicly traded as well, that if the casino end of this, more so than the sports end of this, was legalized in a lot of states, especially the big states, feel like that would have to be a huge boost to that stock, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, even somebody like Bet Rivers, which is Rush Street Interactive, is publicly traded now. They own casinos in several states: New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois. Like I see, like you should be pushing. Yes, you should be. I mean, it's tougher to lobby for because it is like oh, we're taking all casino games online. That's a harder to wrap your head around as a policymaker, but. Yes, absolutely. Everybody should be doing this. And again, as MGM, you can't understate this. It used to be just a land-based company. You go to Vegas, you have a sports betting app there, but they are now very much an online gambling company as well. They spend tons of money. If you're any state with legal sports betting, you know the BetMGM name because you're seeing their commercials on sports broadcasts and everywhere, really. So this is the evolution of it. And I think in some ways it was accelerated by the pandemic in terms of. People obviously not going to casinos as much. Capacity is limited, and right now there's a moment for this. And it's online gambling is the future. Everything in the world is more and more online and everything. And gambling was never going to be any different. It's just a little slower from a regulatory and legislative standpoint because it's not like you flick a switch. But that's we're headed there. It's just a matter of how quickly we get there.
What do you envision the influence of content and content providers is going to be? Like, everyone knows that this show is brought to you by DraftKings. It's a partnership that I've had for a really long time. And if they've never told me what to say, they're like, hey, don't mention competitors all that often. Tell people to play on DraftKings, that kind of thing. Sure. But whatever I want to talk about on the show has always just been fair game. And maybe that's why they picked me. They trust me with that stuff. But they just bought VEASAN, for example. I've heard that there's a bunch of companies in the mix trying to buy Action Network for a hilarious amount of money, which probably isn't worth it. At the same time, but we even see all of these companies sponsoring studio shows on different networks. Do you think it has a negative impact? Not so much on now you have a bunch of people who've never gambled on anything in their life trying to squeeze in gambling and talk about gambling, and it makes for bad content. But when we get 5 years down the line and people are more accustomed to this, do you envision any issues with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, yes, media is a huge part of what's going on in sports betting, and there's, we could break off a legal sports report sub website and probably just cover the media and its intersection with sports betting because there's something going on all the time, from, exclusive Yahoo and BetMGM have a partnership, or we had the big one is Bally bought the regional sports networks that used to be the Fox Sports Net regional network, and Bally isn't even a brand that you can bet on yet, but it's coming, and it's gonna it's now everybody in every state that used to have an FS regional network now gets hammered over the head with Bally. So there's just a ton of that a ton of media interest, and you guys now have a chief media officer as of last week. It's it's a way to connect with customers directly, and you're going to see more of it. But longer term, yes, I think there's already this worry of we're heading down the road of what's happened in the UK and elsewhere, where there's this oversaturation of sports betting content and commercials and all of this, and it starts to feel overwhelming. And I'm not in a state where I get overwhelmed with this, but I know tons of people who live in the New Jersey area or Illinois, and you just get hammered over the head with this stuff. And the UK has seen a pullback. There's been too much advertising and too much content out there about sports betting. There's been a little bit of a drawback in again UK in specific, but so we'll see where it all goes. I hopefully we self-regulate and it doesn't get too out of hand on that front. But there are worries, and again, we're still, to use the reference, we're still in the first or second inning of sports betting. We're not done here, and there's a lot that's still going to happen, and still the amount of content that's out there is still only a drop in the ocean compared to where it could be as it expands into more and more states.
How much did the pandemic facilitate the potential legalization of sports betting in a lot of these states? Now that a lot of these states are broke and have no revenue coming in, like this seems like a pretty safe way, despite the very realistic harm that it could do to people. And they probably have to allocate a certain amount of money to put back in for services for gambling addiction treatment at the same time. But they sell cigarettes to everyone too, so as long as they get their cut, they're probably fine with it.
I mean, I was a little skeptical of this narrative, but that's what happened in New York. Is like it started as part of filling up a giant budget hole, and sports betting got into the conversation. Again, sports betting is not some, it's found money though in a state, right? It's not like the cure all for anybody. It's they're even in New York, where they're aggressively forecasting $500 million to the state on an annual basis, which I think is high. Like that's a drop in the bucket in the overall New York budget, which I think approaches 200 billion. Like that's not a lot of money, right? But it's found money. It's something we can do this and just add $500 million. Sure. It does help that there, in addition to, you have aggressive lobbying, you have states that still want to do this, that say, oh, we're just going to add some money to the state budget that we didn't have before. Easy peasy. Let's do that. So it does make it easier. And, it should be, right now there is, states, have generated less tax revenue. I don't think that's a secret. And a lot of states are dealing with budget shortfalls. We're kind of at the tail end of the legislative session. So we'll see how much more of this happens because of that. But it is, it's always been compelling to add sports betting. And again, I think that's why online casino comes along for the ride, because the opportunity there is actually more on a state by state basis in terms of generating real revenue that's meaningful for the state. Like again, Michigan using all the three states where there's meaningful casino alongside sports betting: Michigan, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Just the casino revenue, I think we're pretty close to. It's either even or slightly outpaces all sports betting revenue across the U.S. wherever it's legal. So that's an idea of how big online casino is relative to sports betting. And I think that's, again, not to belabor the point, but that's the real opportunity for states as they legalize more gambling online.
In terms of market share, and I know this varies from state to state, between DraftKings and FanDuel, how much of the actual market share do they own?
I mean, they're clearly right now 1 or 2, although BetMGM had an investor day just yesterday claiming to be number 2, and that probably includes online casino on top of it. But, like everywhere where the state numbers are right now, FanDuel and DraftKings are 1 and 2 in some order. And usually right now, FanDuel 1, DraftKings 2, if you had to add all of it up in terms of, and we don't have perfect insight into what every state says because we don't always have the exact numbers. Every state reports things differently. It's a giant headache for those of us who report on the industry because it's not homogenous at all. But yeah, right now, FanDuel and DraftKings, FanDuel in whatever order in every state are generally 1 and 2, and that comes from developing a brand over years, from having databases of players from the start of DFS to now, that are people who are ready made for sports betting, easy to convert them into sports bettors when you already have them as a DFS user. So yeah, they've done well. It's not not DraftKings and FanDuel's God-given right to be number 1 and 2 forever. There is a lot of money pouring into this. MGM is the one that's most aggressive, I think, right? Just Caesars just finished its acquisition of William Hill. Everybody's coming for it. It's not, so they can't just the two companies can't just sit around and say, oh, we're going to be 1 and 2 or in some order forever. You have a lot lot still to shake out. Again, early days, still the industry is still shaking out. Bet365, which is a sleeping giant, who knows what they do? They are, the biggest operator in Europe by lots of metrics. Is in New Jersey, but has not really leveraged itself in other states in a real way. So there's still a lot to be said about how this is all shaking out. But yeah, right now as we sit here, the DFS companies have done well.
They had that built-in audience. They already had the customers acquired and were able to convert them over. Plus their technology, especially DraftKings, like the DraftKings mobile app for both DFS and for Sportsbook is fairly seamless and it's really easy to use. So that like the user interface really goes a long way because I've used a few even up in Canada and like they are absolute dog shit. And like I would like I will never use this again. Like it's so slow. It's not intuitive. Like I don't want to have to use this. And I think you're right about Bet365 that a lot of these, I'm just waiting for the big European player to come in, and maybe they just end up doing partnerships with some of the American-based places. But like you said, that company in particular is a sleeping giant in all of this because the brand recognition is so well known around the world at this point. It's just not in the United States. The one that I wanted to leave you with, last thing, is obviously Penn and Barstool. They really thought they would get a lot of conversions from just the amount of people that go on Barstool and listen to those podcasts, but it doesn't seem like it's translated as much. And I even speak to this a little bit too, is we've seen a lot of big fantasy football season-long people get into the gambling space over the past 2 years, but that's not their audience. Their audience is season-long fantasy football. It's not gamblers. Because I've seen people with giant audiences not able to convert their audience and following over, whereas someone like me who's talked about daily fantasy and gambling for the past 7 years on my show, my audience is very fluent in this stuff and they're easy to convert over, or probably already have converted over. That's why they're watching this show. They were on the Offshores and now they're going over to the legal books. Did Penn kind of make a weird play with this, or is there still time for this to develop and really pay some giant dividends?
There's still time. I mean, the brand is good. I mean, if they just put out Penn National Sportsbook, that's no good, right? So they needed to do something. Like nobody knows what Penn National is. The Hollywood Casino is the regional brand that's in a lot of states, but that didn't have, that doesn't have any kind of cachet in terms of converting customers. So that from that standpoint, Barstool makes a ton of sense. It has put them into the conversation very quickly. But you're right, it has not, the number when Penn National took the minority stake in Barstool to deploy it as a sportsbook brand was, we have 66 million fans. That's the number I kept seeing, and all of them are just going to become sports bettors. That is not happening. That is most clearly not happening, because if it was, they'd be number one in every state immediately. They'd snap their fingers. We're number one. That's not happening. They are, between number 3 and number 4, pretty much everywhere they are, and pretty distant 3 and 4 depending on the state. And some of this is they are late to the game. They just launched in Pennsylvania first last year, late last year, and there's ground to be made up. Can it still work? I still believe it can work, but the narrative we were telling is that El Presidente and his fans would just start, everybody would just start betting, and that's not happening. And they have to, it's much ballyhooed. They say we don't spend any on external marketing, and they need to clearly spend on external marketing if they're going to compete. And they're bonusing just as aggressively as everyone else in the market, and it's still only resulting in them being 3rd or 4th. Now, again, all the caveat of all this is very early days. They can change what they're doing, but Penn National needed the brand. They needed, and from that standpoint, I think it made a ton of sense. And there wasn't anything else that's quite as ready-made as Barstool was. Somebody was going to part with them and do this. So, but yeah, it's been interesting to follow. It's definitely the most interesting thing I see, and the thing that people engage the most with. People are, sports bettors are also amateur stock traders, and online gambling stocks are hot right now. So there's more interest about Penn National and Barstool than anything. And the stock has gone from $4 at the low to up to, at one point I think it was pushing 140. It's back down in the 90s right now, but wild ride if you own some Penn National stock, and who knows where it's going to go from here. But there's still more time for Barstool and Penn to catch up.
Dustin Gouker, you can find him on Twitter at Dustin Gouker, and check out the legalsportsreport.com for all the up-to-date news on what is happening potentially in your state. Remember to smash the like button on the way out and subscribe to Mayo Media Network. Rate and review the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, and join the Mayo Media Network newsletter for more promotions, more content, and exclusive access to some brand new content and information as well. Thank you all for watching. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!